Once again, the WNBA media is spinning a story, but not the story. And like always, it's designed to make you believe the league is thriving without Caitlin Clark. They proudly reported that this year's finals were the most watched in 25 years. But what they didn't say out loud will make you look at those numbers very differently, because once you understand what's really happening behind the scenes, you'll see the pattern. And trust me, you won't be able to unsee it. We've been watching this same narrative all season long, and after I show you the receipts, it'll be crystal clear what the media's been trying to hype up and what they've been quietly sweeping under the rug. So before we break it all down, go ahead and hit that like button if you're sick of seeing the media downplay Caitlin Clark's impact on basketball. And just for fun, drop a Y or N in the comments if you even watched a minute of the finals. I'll pin my answer down there too. Alright, let's talk facts. The WNBA media has been cherry-picking stats all year to make the league look strong without Caitlin. But when you dig a little deeper, the agenda becomes obvious. Let's rewind to March Madness. Caitlin Clark and the Iowa Hawkeyes reached the national title game in both 2023 and 2024, and both years viewership was off the charts. In 2024, that Iowa versus South Carolina championship hit an insane 18.9 million viewers. Keep that number in your head, it's important. Fast forward to 2025, Caitlin's gone, and everyone expected ratings to dip, but ESPN didn't want that headline. So during the 2025 tournament, from the Sweet 16 to the Elite 8, ESPN quietly started comparing ratings to 2023 instead of 2024. Then when the Final Four and championship rolled around, they suddenly stopped making comparisons altogether, and it's pretty obvious why. If they had compared honestly 2025 versus 2024, the actual previous year, they would have had to admit that viewership fell by over 10 million. That's not a small drop, that's a collapse. Now tell me that wasn't intentional, and it didn't stop there. During the 2025 WNBA draft, ESPN bragged about a 119% increase in viewership. But again, they compared to 2023. Because if they compared it to 2024, the year Caitlin Clark was drafted, they'd have to admit the truth. Ratings didn't rise, they plummeted, down 49%. Half the audience vanished. But wait, it gets even worse. Right after this year's All-Star game, ESPN dropped another flashy post claiming viewership skyrocketed 158%. Guess what? Once again, compared to 2023, because if they use 2024's Caitlin Clark-led All-Star game as the baseline, they'd have to confess that viewership actually dropped 36%. That's more than 1.2 million fewer people tuning in, and even that might be generous. If Caitlin had played instead of coaching from the sidelines, those numbers probably would have soared past 3.4 million, maybe even 4 million. People tune in just to see her, even if she's not on the floor. So that's 3 straight cases: March Madness, the draft, and the All-Star game, where the media skipped 2024 on purpose to hide the Caitlin Clark effect. There's no other logical explanation. Now, surely they wouldn't pull the same stunt with the WNBA finals, right? After all, Caitlin wasn't in the finals last year, so why compare to 2023? Well, I had a feeling they'd try something sneaky, and here's why. Back in 2024, Caitlin and the Indiana Fever drew 2.5 million viewers for their Game 2 against the Connecticut Sun, still the most watched WNBA playoff game ever on ESPN. The next closest, Liberty vs. Lynx Game 5 last season, which averaged 2.15 million, so heading into this year's playoffs, without Caitlin Clark, there was zero reason to expect anything close to those numbers. Even when the Fever faced the Aces in the semifinals, they still pulled in 1.56 million on average, higher than almost any other matchup. But once the finals came around, with no Fever in sight, I had serious doubts the Aces Mercury series could even match that, and the early warning signs were everywhere. Tickets for Game 1 were going for $35. Courtside seats were just a few $100. Meanwhile, when the Fever played in New York earlier this season, the cheapest seats at Barclays Center were $112, and courtside ran into the thousands. That price drop said it all. Demand wasn't there. And for a league that keeps pushing the record growth narrative, that could have been a PR disaster. So when the ratings finally came out, everyone was stunned.
1.9 million viewers with a peak of 2.5 million. ESPN scores most watched Game 1 of the WNBA Finals in 28 years.
Game 1 of the finals pulled in 1.9 million viewers, which on paper looks like a massive improvement from last year's Game 1 that only hit 1.1 million. At first glance, that sounds like the league is booming. Nearly double the audience, right? Sure, it's still short of Caitlin Clark's 2.5 million viewers from her playoff showdown against the Connecticut Sun, but if you're comparing finals to finals, that jump looks impressive. Except that headline didn't tell the whole story. The media was quick to hype up the percentage increase, but what they conveniently left out is how those numbers were actually measured. And that little detail changes everything.
Nielsen methodology change. A key factor in 2025 is a change in Nielsen's methodology to include big data plus panel, which incorporates out-of-home viewing, a change that generally results in higher reported viewership for all sports broadcasts compared to previous years.
That missing detail changes everything. Here's what the media conveniently left out. Nielsen completely overhauled its TV rating system on September 2nd, right before the WNBA finals, and that update had a direct impact on how those viewership numbers were counted. Before the change, Nielsen's national ratings came from roughly 42,000 households. After the update, it started pulling data from more than 75 million devices. That's not a small tweak, that's a massive expansion in sample size. Even Nielsen admitted this upgrade would naturally make ratings look higher than before, which means any direct comparison to past years isn't just misleading, it's meaningless. You're not comparing year-over-year growth. You're comparing two completely different systems. This season's data is basically year one of a brand new measurement era, so that flashy 1.9 million viewers headline everyone's bragging about, it can't be used to prove the league is actually growing. Yes, the number is technically real, but without context, it paints a totally distorted picture. And here's the problem. We live in a world that runs on headlines and hot takes. Most people see 1.9 million viewers and record increase and never stop to ask why. But once you understand how the numbers were inflated, what happened after Game 1 tells an even bigger story.
Time using the best of 7 format, the WNBA finals have averaged 1.9 million viewers, a peak of 2.5, 1.2, a peak of 1.4. The Fever annihilate that in regular season games all the time. 1.3 million viewers, a peak of 1.6. They annihilate that on a regular basis.
Even with Nielsen's new system inflating the numbers, the finals couldn't hold the audience. After Game 1's strong start, viewership dropped hard. Games 2 and 3 dipped all the way down to around 1.2 million viewers. That's a steep fall, especially considering this new ratings method counts way more devices than before. As Rhodes Rants pointed out, the Indiana Fever were pulling in better numbers under the old system. And that's no coincidence. When Caitlin Clark was on the floor, the Fever regularly topped 2 million viewers during the regular season. Even their preseason matchup against Brazil drew 1.3 million. Let that sink in. A preseason game featuring Caitlin Clark brought in more viewers than a finals game, and it did so using a smaller measurement pool. If that doesn't prove who truly drives attention in the WNBA, I don't know what does. And here's where the pattern repeats itself. Remember March Madness? The media stopped comparing year-to-year numbers the moment the ratings started slipping. Well, they just pulled the same move again. For Game 1, every headline screamed about massive growth and record highs. But when Games 2 and 3 came in, silence. Suddenly no one was talking about comparisons to 2024 anymore. And there's a reason for that. And if you line up Game 2's 1.2 million viewers next to 2024's finals numbers using the same standard, this year's finals actually underperformed. All that hype disappeared the moment the truth became impossible to spin.
Last year, Game 2 did 1.34 million. Viewership peaked with 1.82 million.
Even with Nielsen's boosted rating system padding the stats, Game 2 of this year's finals actually pulled fewer viewers than Game 2 last year. And if we were still using the old measurement method, that drop would look even worse, possibly dipping below 1 million viewers. In other words, the real audience was probably much smaller than what the public was led to believe. But that didn't stop Front Office Sports from publishing a headline bragging that the 2025 WNBA finals were the most watched in 25 years. At first glance, it sounded like a huge win for the league, a headline built to go viral. What they didn't mention, at least not until you dug deep into the fine print, was why those totals appeared so inflated in the first place.
The totals.
audience metrics are getting a bump this year from Nielsen. Let me repeat that. Audience metrics are getting a bump this year from Nielsen, which recently changed its tracking methods to include set-top boxes and smart TVs. So we're going to run, how many, what is this? What is it? 1, 2, 3, 4. You got to go way down here to the 5th paragraph to get to a crucial piece of information that is literally one sentence long.
Let's be real, there's no need to go full conspiracy mode here. When the most important detail is buried halfway down an article, it's clear what the goal is. They want you to read the headline, nod, and move on. That headline is the message. The WNBA is thriving like never before. But we've seen this pattern over and over again. Critical details get buried, comparisons are handpicked, and any inconvenient data quietly disappears. And you can bet that as the league starts rolling out more end-of-season reports, we'll see a flood of headlines hyping 2025 as another record-breaking year for ratings and attendance. But let's not lose sight of what's really driving those numbers. The Indiana Fever, the team that consistently pulls in the biggest audiences, had a record 41 nationally televised games this year. Other franchises literally moved into larger arenas, some 2 to 4 times the size, just so they could host the Fever. And don't forget, the league added a brand new expansion team, which automatically boosts total attendance figures. Of course, the WNBA wants to keep pushing the growth narrative. Team valuations have more than doubled since Caitlin Clark entered the league, and they can't afford to make it look like she's the sole reason behind that surge. But let's be honest, we all know what's coming next. When Caitlin returns and her games start pulling 3 to 4 million viewers under Nielsen's new system, the league will celebrate it as another WNBA success story, instead of giving her the credit she deserves. After watching this league closely for 2 straight seasons and spending 2 decades working in marketing and PR, it's become predictable, almost funny, how easily they spin the story, and it's not stopping anytime soon. That's just the reality of being a Caitlin Clark fan in today's WNBA. Drop a W in the comments if you made it to the end, cause you're a winner for sticking through the whole video. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.